Welcome to my Senate prediction for June, so let's start. And that's it for the safe races. So first of all, for Utah and Alaska. In Utah, even though Evan McMullin will get the support from the Democrats, because as many of you know, the Democrats are actually not putting a nominee and they're endorsing Evan McMullin as an independent in this race, which in my opinion is the best decision they could have made. Let's look at the polling. Let's just go to the Democratic convention. So the polling, there isn't any. Here's the endorsement of the Democrats towards McMullin. This will affect the race only a slightly bit, in my opinion. If Trump had won in 2020, this would have been one of the most, if not the most interesting race in this cycle. I think that you could have seen the race maybe narrowed down to a likely margin. Lean margin, I doubt it, but I think the ads would have been really good and interesting as well. And yeah, it does narrow the race a tiny bit, but still the GOP wins this race by a safe margin. While for Alaska, in short, this race is really between the incumbent Lisa Murkowski, who is more, not liberal, but she is more to the middle, against the Trump-backed candidate Shabaka. And I'm still not sure on who's going to be the nominee in this race, but either way, I see the Republicans winning this race by a safe margin against the Democrats easily. And now let's talk about the likely states, or I should say for Missouri, one of those races that could narrow down depending on who the candidate is. So for Missouri, the main candidate, if you don't know, who is still leading, is Greetings. And let's look at the polls briefly. It went down slightly bit, but he still has a decent chunk of the support. And I expect Donald Trump to endorse him, probably. I think he does endorse Greetings. And Eric Greetings still has a lot of baggage, which will hurt him. And if he is the nominee, which I do think because he might get the Trump endorsement, then this race probably drops down to a likely race. But if it's another person like Hartzler, this goes back up to a safe margin. But for now, likely. And now for Washington. So with the Democrats having a really bad moment in the national environment, most races will be quite closer. For example, I think the incumbent Patty Murray Democrat will go against Tiffany Smiley, who is doing quite well in the polls. It's really between solid and likely D. And let me see. So you can see there's like around like a 10-point difference between them, and which is why I do think that Democrats still win here, but only by like, who knows, 8 to 10%, which is a likely state in this scenario. So, and for the other likely states, Colorado, not much to say here, apart from Michael Bennet will probably win, probably by 7 to 9%. Only way I could see this race going down to lean or even tilted, maybe if Cory Gardner decides to run again in 2022. But for now, likely race for the Democrats. And for the other ones, Florida, we could do Wikipedia for like a brief second. It's between Marco Rubio, the incumbent, and Val Demings, the Democrat. So the Democrat, yeah, right there. And for the polls, you can clearly see that Marco Rubio is winning by at least 9%, but he's going to get a lot of the undecided voters. I think he barely misses out on Florida being not a safe state in the Senate race, but quite close to getting that double number margins of 10%. I think Marco Rubio wins here by 8 to 10 or 9 to 11%. And yeah, for North Carolina, we already know it's going to be Ted Budd against Cherry Beasley, and with this national environment, it's going to be an easy win for the GOP, and I think he wins by 5 to even 7%. And now for the state of Ohio, one of my favorite races. So it's against Tim Ryan versus JD Vance. So Tim Ryan has done quite well with ads, but still, this is Ohio, bear in mind. So I see JD Vance winning this race by, I would say, 7 to 9%, depends on how well he campaigns and stuff. So yeah, easy one for the GOP in this race. And for the last one, for Wisconsin, Ron Johnson against, let me look. For the Democrats, if it's Mandela Barnes, I will say it's probably going to be a likely margin for Ron Johnson in this race. But if it's another person like Sarah or Tom Nelson doesn't have the momentum. So if it's Ron Johnson against Mandela Barnes, easy win for him and for his re-election bid by similar to North Carolina 5 to even 7% in this national environment. And that's it for the likely and safe races. So as you can see, Republicans already have 49 seats against the Democrats 46 seats for the lean races in this election. So first of all, let's go to Arizona first. Arizona, it's between incumbent Mark Kelly and for the Republican primary, it's probably going to be Blake Masters who gets the Trump endorsement. He probably does get the Trump endorsement at the end of the day. He has gotten more momentum, but even then, it's really tied. And let's look at the polls. Mark Vernovich against Mark Kelly, the Mark battle. Not that much, so I think that with this current national environment, the GOP should easily be able to win this race by a lean margin, since Mark Kelly has not gone to the center before the election season, so 1 to 3% win for the GOP here. And now let's go to Pennsylvania. So yeah, Pennsylvania, where there was a primary race not that long ago. So for the primary, John Fetterman still is the nominee, of course. Thankfully, his heart attack was not fatal, while for the Republicans, it was a messy race in this primary. I mean, it was really between Oz and McCormick, but, you know, I think Oz has won. Technically, there will probably be a recount, maybe, because it was really close, but for the polling between Oz and Fetterman, I think it should be below in this section. So most people have it as a toss-up or tilt-R, which I could see both reasons why. I think Fetterman is a decent candidate for the state of Pennsylvania, but with this current national environment, I think that I'm not too sure, but I'm going to give Oz the win by a lean margin barely. Even though I could see it dropping down to a tilt margin, I think that the GOP wins this race between 0.5% to 2.5%. And yeah, so I think lean R. And now for the other races. So first of all, Nevada's one of those that I'm kind of really torn on. So if you don't know yet, incumbent Democrat Cortez Masto is here. So she was elected in 2016, but bear in mind the Latino vote at the moment is trending to the right. So for the Republican primary, let's go. Yeah, finally, it's looking like it's going to be like salt, almost 99% sure of that. And for the polling between them, yeah, it's from here, so it could be more recent, but you can see that Black Salt is really doing well in this race, and I think that, similar to Pennsylvania, I could see this race either being a tilt or a lean margin for the Republicans. But I'm really torn because I think this could either be one of the closest states alongside, you know, New Hampshire and Georgia, around 0.25% to 2% or 2.5%. But for now, I'm going to leave it as a lean state barely. But in the future, I'm probably going to drop this race to a tilt state because an incumbency could help Democrats. But for now, barely a lean state for the GOP. And now for the probably the two closest races I could think of. Let's start off first of all for New Hampshire. So for the Senate race in New Hampshire, it's between incumbent Democrat Maggie Hassan and Republican Chuck Morris, who is an okay candidate, but the GOP could have done way better against in this red wave year. And at the moment, I see this race being one of the closest ones in this cycle, but I will give this as a narrow, but really narrow Democrat win. I think Hassan barely pulls it off. I think she could get some momentum in this state, especially if Chuck Morris doesn't do as good as other people. So yeah, tilt state for the Democrats. And now for Georgia. So If you don't know already, it's going to be Warnock incumbent against Herschel Walker, the former football player. And of course, we already know that, but for the polling in this race, I want to see the latest polling here, so I don't think there's much, but you can see that Warnock and Herschel Walker kind of really toe-to-toe, or neck and neck I should say, because these undecided voters will go for Herschel Walker probably. The main issue for Walker is that he doesn't have too much charisma apart from talking about football, and that's the only thing that the GOP should really let him talk only about football. And yeah, so I think with this national environment and him only talking about football, I think Herschel Walker should be able to barely win this race and be carried basically by the red wave in this election. And I see him winning here by a total margin of less than 1%, probably 0.25% to 0.5%. And yes, you can see the Republicans win with 53 seats against the Democrats' 47 seats. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next video.